Hello, everyone. My name is Rosie Rivera, and today I'm going to be discussing the public relations crisis that happened with the company Boeing, specifically the 737 MAX 8. So, a little bit of the background information. According to Boeing's website, Boeing is an aerospace company and the world's largest manufacturer of commercial jetliners, defense, space, and security systems, and service provider of aftermarket support. So they're basically very well known, and they used to be a very strong company in the airline industry. They're the ones who create the major airlines and the parts and the airplanes for major airlines. So on March 10th, 2019, a Boeing 737 MAX 8 operated by Ethiopian Airlines was crashed on its destination, on its way to its destination, which killed all 157 passengers. It's important to note that 5 months prior to this incident, Lion Air 610, who was also an airplane created by Boeing, was also involved in a crash that resulted in the death of around 189 people, which were also all the passengers and crew that were on that airplane. Here's a picture of the Boeing 737 crash site. As you can see, it was very severe, and there were obviously no survivors. So when we look at the crisis situation that happened with this company, we want to look at the stakeholders and the publics that were involved. Specifically in this case, I would say that the primary stakeholders and publics were the family members of the victims. Obviously, they had the most to lose, and I would say that they are one of the main stakeholders and publics involved in this. Another public would be the frequent flyers, with the airlines having now being put into question. Obviously, the frequent flyers have now they have trust issues, and some of them have not wanted to fly anymore because of the incidents that happened, because they don't know if they're safe on the airlines. And that being said, another stakeholder would be the airline companies, because they are now losing profits due to people not wanting to fly. And the last one would be the general public. Even if people aren't flying and the family members weren't involved in this accident, the general public is kind of now has focused their attention and made a decision on how they view this airline or the airlines. So that is definitely a public that would be involved as well. So the cause behind the crash. It was determined by crash investigators that the crashes were caused by the plane's automatic safety systems. It was said that the systems overrode pilots' attempts to lift the nose and the aircraft, causing the planes to nosedive and crash. So Boeing had created a mechanism, I guess, and it's kind of similar to the way that you would press cruise control on a car. So the airline was doing that, and then whenever the pilots went to try to override that, it wouldn't override it, and so it malfunctioned, and it ended up obviously nosediving and causing the planes to crash. Initially, Boeing blamed the crashes on the pilot error rather than being transparent about their crucial mistakes. Like I said, the pilots did try to keep the plane from crashing, but when they weren't able to, they blamed the pilots, and unfortunately, it turns out that the pilots of the aircrafts were never told about the system in question, and no proper training was ever given to them to solve the issue. It looks like Boeing was trying to save money, and therefore saving money on training and saving time by training pilots to learn how to override the system and to learn about the new mechanism itself. So the major problem with this was that Boeing knew about the malfunction and sold the planes anyway, with the intentions of resolving the issue before anything happened. So they sold it. The first crash happened. I think people normally just thought it was an accident, a freak accident, and didn't think much of it. But then when the second crash happened, they started to question what was going on, and then they realized that they already knew about the issue. They were just not doing anything to prevent any further things from happening, and unfortunately, it came back on them because another 100 and some people died in the second crash of March in 2019. So Boeing's response. The company downplayed the accidents by ignoring safety protocols even after the incidents occurred. Like I said, they had months prior to the incident last year, they also had they had a crash which resulted in the death of everybody on the plane. So when that happened, like I said, they knew what had happened, and they still did nothing to rectify the situation, causing the second plane to have the same kind of accident and result in the same deaths. It was reported that even Boeing CEO stated that the planes were safe, insisting that with proper training, the pilots would be able to override the system. While he said that they were safe, it was later found that he knew that the pilots had no training, and then that he still did nothing to try to get the proper training or to fix the situation. He was not transparent to begin with. So he was falsely communicating this issue, which resulted in loss of trust. They took no responsibility, and their blame shifting created a careless and unsympathetic image of the company. So although, as I've stated many times now, although the pilots literally lost their lives, Boeing still shifted the blame to them, saying that it was ultimately their fault that the planes crashed because they didn't respond correctly. Instead of saying that it was them and apologizing for it and being transparent, they just didn't take the blame. They didn't want to take the blame for the deaths that occurred. That being said, we turn over to look at what should have been done. First and foremost, obviously, to avoid any kind of tragic incident, we'd want to first provide adequate training. As I've said, the pilots had zero training. Boeing tried to restore their funds by not providing the time and money that it would take to train the pilots. So they, I guess, with adequate training, both of these incidents could have been avoided. Secondly, since they unfortunately did happen, taking responsibility would be the very first thing that they should have done. Going forward, they should have also been grounded all planes to show that they care about safety and not just finances. After the first crash that happened, what they should have done was ground their planes so that they could do a thorough investigation, inspect all planes and jets, and make sure that they were all flying properly, which would show they would lose some profits, but in the end it would show that they were at least trying or caring about the safety of others rather than the money that they would be losing. Clearly they didn't ground the planes and they didn't change anything, and so the second plane then had a similar accident as the first one. And lastly, communication is key. Acknowledging the mistakes, addressing the plans going forward, acknowledging their mistakes. So obviously saying, I know this happened, this was our fault, and then this is what we're going to do going forward, and then provide incentives for continued loyalty, such as discounted plane tickets or rewards programs, something that gives the audience a sense of trust, but also gives them an incentive to continue to want to work with them. So the applicable theories for this case that I found were the media effects theory, excellence theory, and and symbolic relationships. With the media effects theory, I applied the hypodermic needle scenario where the media contents have a direct impact on attitudes and behaviors of audiences. Media is powerful and has a direct effect on mass individuals. So with this, like I had said, one of the publics would be the general public, because this was obviously something that was very highly publicized, and so a lot of people took what was in the media and made a decision on the company and the company's reputation just by what was being, said in the mass media, which obviously wasn't positive, and as it shouldn't have been. Second, the excellence theory. This theory is the value of communications. It states that PR practitioners should not just be the mouthpiece, but should actually identify audience and participate in two-way communication. This is something that a theory that could have been applied had they taken a different route. If the PR practitioners would have been, spoken on behalf of the company and stated what they were wanting to do, but also kept an open line of communication and heard the public's opinion and then applied that to further rectify the situation, it could have resulted in a way different outcome than what it did. And lastly, symbolic relationships, which is the image of an organization. This focuses on image building and maintaining. So this incident obviously was very negatively impacted Boeing and Boeing's reputation. So going forward, symbolic relationships is something that needs to be focused on by rebuilding their image and then maintaining that going forward. So where is Boeing now? Since the two incidents that happened, stocks took a major hit, causing the company's once solid image to be negatively impacted. The two fatal crashes also caused the first financial loss for Boeing in 20 years. So although they were doing their best to try to keep their finances from taking a hit, this actually saying nothing and not taking responsibility turned out worse for them. As we can see, they had lost a lot of money due to their negative reputation. The president and CEO of the company was also fired in 2019. It was also said that one of the board members took his position, and more people were concerned about that as well, because he was already on the board when the other two crashes happened. So a lot of people were questioning as to whether he would be able to bring new ideas to the table. And then lastly, the Federal Aviation Administration has lifted the order that suspended 737-8 and 737-9 operations under its jurisdiction. So at one point after the second crash, I believe they had suspended all the operations, but it has now since been lifted, and they're able to operate under their jurisdiction. And lastly, the takeaways. As we learned this semester, reputation is very important in any kind of business or organization, and it's hard to build, but it takes seconds to damage. Obviously, as we saw in this instance, the company took a very hard hit, and the reputation was built within a matter of seconds. It's always important to remain open and honest about the situation, no matter how bad. So, although the situation was bad, I think if they would have been open about it to begin with, it wouldn't have resulted in, they would have lost a lot of trust, but it wouldn't have been as much as is lost now, and the reputation wouldn't have been as severed as it did, since they did nothing. And then lastly, companies should always prioritize stakeholders and target audiences over profits, because without them, there are no profits. So although they were trying to save resources and finances, they ended up losing their audiences, and therefore their finances took a hit as well. So that's it for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.